The budget is in the hands of the city council, and leaders have until the end of the month to get it finalized.
These fees and tax increases are impacting the residents of Baltimore.
After a week of sometimes contentious budget hearings,
I can't commit to you that I'll have an update.
It's been 18 months. How many months do you feel like you need?
the council will decide what they want to change in the mayor's proposal. I'm going in depth on the budget hearings and what the decisions could mean for you. Thank you for joining us for this week's edition of Fox 45 News in Depth. I'm Mackenzie Frost. City leaders are working on the budget for fiscal year 2026. The city is facing an $85 million budget shortfall. The mayor proposed a budget addressing that shortfall, but it'll be up to the council to approve it. The council does have the power to make some changes in that budget proposal, and the appropriations spent 6 days hearing from various city agencies about their funding needs. One of those agencies during those budget hearings was the Baltimore City public school system. It's set to get more money from the state and city than it did last year, despite low student performance.
Thank you, Chair and Vice Chair.
The Baltimore City Council questioning the leader of city schools, CEO Dr. Sonia Santelises, about the proposed $1.9 billion budget.
With that said, we will now dive right in.
That includes a 7% increase in blueprint funding, which was a fight to keep this year. Lawmakers in Annapolis worked to scale back the decades-long multi-billion-dollar education spending plan amid the state's budget crisis. City Schools has a funded enrollment of 71,474 students, which is an increase of just over 1,000 kids.
Even after years of declining population within the city.
All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Amendments have been adopted.
During this last legislative session, Governor Wes Moore proposed a pause in concentration of poverty grants, money going toward community schools for additional resources like literacy coaches and other support services.
The blueprint is designed to fund some schools at higher levels than others. That is by design.
Lawmakers in both the House and the Senate restored that funding during session.
Baltimore City has the largest concentration of poverty in the state.
But more changes to the blueprint are likely in the years to come, and Dr. Santelises warns council members.
Blueprint dollars are not guaranteed. This blueprint bill that passed in April does include cuts to foundation funding for fiscal year 27 and 28.
However, it's also important to remember the blueprint dollars are on top of what the city already spends in the classroom. And right now, City Schools continues to rank near the bottom in performance, despite dumping millions of dollars into schools. The city spends about $18,270 per student, the 13th most among the country's 100 largest school systems, according to the 2024 U.S. Census. The National Assessment of Educational Progress, known as the nation's report card, reveals city schools rank among the lowest performing schools in the country for math and reading. This next budget year, the city is slated to get $166 million in concentrated poverty grants, aiming to help boost students who need more support. Some members of the council focusing on the issue of students not even making it to the classroom.
The bottom line is that if kids don't show up to school, they're not going to get a great job. They're not going to go to college. They're not going to be in a trade or an apprenticeship.
But Dr. Santelises argues the school system cannot afford to buy a full yellow school bus fleet, and working with the MTA bus system is getting better, but there still are concerns.
We are going to have a citywide discussion of what is the distance at which we bus children, right? And we live in a city that, for very good reason, we have bused large numbers of children. We are reaching a point where the financial sustainability of our current walk zones versus bus zones, I'm not sure is frankly fully sustainable.
Ultimately, the blueprint plan remains in place, pumping tax dollars into schools that continue to struggle with performance, and the budget to operate city schools gets bigger every year. Project Baltimore's Chris Papps joins me now. Chris, thanks for being here.
Well, thank you for having me.
Let's start with the search for the next city school CEO. The school board hired a consulting firm. What's the timeline right now to replace Dr. Sonia Santelises?
Well, as of now, her contract expires on June 30th of 2026, so about 13 months from now. But over the past year or two, she has been given, extension after extension, 6-month extension, 1-year extension. So as of now, about 13 months, but I wouldn't be surprised, and don't be surprised, if you see that get extended a little bit longer.
Now, there have been concerns with Dr. Santelises' leadership during her tenure at the helm of city schools, and you've reported on some of those problems. What are some of the biggest takeaways, do you think, from her time leading city schools?
Well, if you look at when Dr. Santelises came, her first school year was a 2016-2017 school year, and then you look at the most recent data, and you sort of look at these 8 years that Dr. Santelises has been there. You can look at the data, and people can make determinations for themselves how those 8 years have gone. When Dr. Santelises came in June 30th of 2016, her first graduation rate was 71%. The most recent graduation rate last year, because this year's numbers aren't calculated yet, are 71%. It's unchanged. But when you look at attendance is lower now than it was 8 years ago. Chronic absenteeism is higher. The dropout rate is higher. Only 10% of students in Baltimore City schools, throughout the entire school system, all the students that have taken the state math test, 10% are proficient in math. The average SAT score is lower now than it was 8 years ago. Now, a lot of people will point to COVID and say COVID is in there, which it certainly was. But many of these metrics, if you look at them, were going in the wrong direction prior to COVID. COVID certainly exacerbated the issues. But more than that, it may have just highlighted the issues to show what they really are. But again, you look at those 8 years and you can see the school system statistically is in a worse place now than it was when Dr. Santelises started.
Now, the next CEO will continue to implement the blueprint, which is already in place. But do you think the blueprint and the requirements will factor into who the school board decides to ultimately hire as the next CEO?
You know what? It would be challenging for somebody to come in from the outside and sort of start this from scratch. It kind of feels to me that I'm sure there's people that are inside Dr. Santelises' circle, inside of her cabinet, that are going to be looking for those jobs because the blueprint is massive. And it's something that when it first passed in 2021, after Governor Larry Hogan vetoed it, the legislature overrode the veto. It has changed since then. This legislative session, they had to make changes because it wasn't workable. Next year, there's likely going to be more changes. The year after that, after the midterm election, that's when I'm hearing from lawmakers. That's when the big change is going to happen to the blueprint, because many of the lawmakers in Annapolis don't want to make big changes before an election. They're going to wait till after the election. So this is a very fluid situation. It's very complicated. School systems are having a really difficult time figuring out the funding mandates, the spending mandates. And if you think about it, Mackenzie, for somebody to come in from Texas, for example, and start fresh is going to be extremely challenging with the blueprint for Maryland's future.
Well, we know that you and your team at Project Baltimore will continue to keep us updated as those changes happen. Chris Papps, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Tensions run high at some of the other budget hearings. We'll show you where city council members and agency leaders butt heads right after the break. The budget hearing process in Baltimore lasts 6 days. The council's Budget and Appropriations Committee hears from at least 40 different agencies about their needs and questions leaders from each one about their operations and use of fundings. We're taking a look at some of the highest profile hearings. That includes the Office of Inspector General. IG Isabel Cumming is asking for an additional agent to look into concerns within DPW. The request follows a number of reports from her office detailing the issues within the department. Earlier this year, the Inspector General says her advisory board approved 2 new positions for her office, but the mayor cut those plans.
The mayor had to balance an $85 million budget shortfall as part of his spending plan for fiscal 26. So what that meant is that the number of enhancement requests that were funded in this budget were very limited. And ultimately, the mayor did not include funding for this particular request.
My office took on ethics and whistleblower back in 21. I became the Inspector General in 2018. When I became the Inspector General, there was at that time $240,000 of savings and waste, and there were 70 hotline complaints. Like I told you, we are now at $10 million of savings and waste, and I get over 800 complaints. The amount of increase in the staff has not been the same level as other agencies, especially when you think there's been 271 positions added and 14 positions alone added this year in the mayor's office.
The Office of the Inspector General also oversees the city's ethics board. Cumming pointed out that board is short a member and has been so for 18 months. Mayor Brandon Scott has to appoint someone to fill the vacancy. The council president pressing a representative from the mayor's office about why the vacancy still exists.
Chris, do we have an opening on the board?
Yes, we do.
How long have we had it?
We have had an opening on the board since December 31st, 2023.
Laura, when can we get that nomination to Inspector General and to Mr. Homburger?
We're working on it.
Can I get a date by which you'll submit that?
It'd be hard to do that, Mr. Chair. Mr. President, there's a vetting process for members of boards and commissions that we go through. And then separately, as the Inspector General and Mr. Hamburger mentioned, this person has to be from the non-majority party, which has been particularly difficult to fill. That's a pretty hard one in Baltimore City, but we're working on it. We have a couple candidates under consideration right now, and I'm hopeful
Chris,
that
how
we'll
long
be
did you
filling
say it's been open till? It's been open since?
It's
18 months.
18 months.
18 months is a very, very long time. I'm sure we can find one person or 2 people maybe that fit this. Right, it could be, my colleague just said, could be a Green Party person, could be a Republican, could be.
We understand that, Mr. President, and as I said, we're going to make the appointment as soon as we can.
All right, so I'm gonna make a committee request. By Thursday of next week, close of business, I would like an update on where we are in the process of nominating someone to the ethics board so that they can get their 5 members.
Mr. President, we have a process. Like, that is the mayor's duty to appoint people to boards and commissions. I can't commit to you that I'll have an update on where we are by, this next Thursday coming up?
How many more months? I mean, it's been 18 months. How many months do you feel like you need to fill a vacant slot on this board?
Yeah, we will provide you with an overdate of the process we've taken to find a nominee for this seat.
Thank you. By Thursday of next week?
I can follow up with you. I'll follow up with you.
By Thursday of next week?
I'm not going to commit, Mr. President, to a date on the follow-up. I said I'll look at the progress and where we've been and what we've done, and then I'll provide that to you. Maybe we can do it by Thursday.
DPW Director Khalil Zaid was also in the hot seat during his department's budget hearing. Council members asked him about the concerns the Inspector General reported on last year, asking what the department has done to improve the culture and worker safety. The director pointed out a new heat safety plan that's in place, along with other new safety plans and emergency protocols. However, he says supervisors still need a lot of training.
The weak link probably at the supervisory level, it is the front workers and then the supervisor. They need a lot of training, and we're getting a lot of training to those folks and training with accountability as well.
And I'm saying if these guys, women, they can't do the job, get rid of them. We get calls all day long about You know, we need to get people hired for DPW. They're willing to work. Get rid of them. Get rid of them. We need to move forward. You know, Baltimore is a city where this mayor has put a lot of money, a lot of time and dedication into making sure we're keeping it clean. And he has shown it. He's led by example. You and I have conversations where we've never seen a mayor put that much money into DPW, and he is doing it. Him himself has driven on the back of those trucks. So I'm just saying, let's be the city. We've got to be a pilot to other cities to show that we can turn this thing around, but we need to turn it around like right now.
Council members question leaders from the fire department as well about staffing and overtime pay. Last year, the city spent $139 million on overtime, much of that overtime coming from the fire department, particularly for paramedics. The city council president asking what the department is doing to solve the problem.
Can you describe the controls that you are putting in place in order to curtail overtime, and also what you are doing to recruit and retain more EMT paramedics into the force?
About a year ago, we launched a very ambitious recruiting tool. We decided we were going to go out and do it by way of QR code. And we put those tools on every piece of fire apparatus in the city. And every event, community event, sporting event, going out to get dinner, going to get breakfast, and in some cases, emergency incident calls. We had a recruitment tool in hand, in a folder, and all they had to do was pull it out and talk to people who want to join the fire department.
Staffing is also a big concern for the Baltimore Police Department, another big source of overtime pay for the city. During its budget hearing, Commissioner Richard Worley says the department is 492 officers short. It was also revealed the department spent more than $64 million on overtime in 2024. Police leaders say they're confident they'll be able to hire more officers in the coming months to cut back on that overtime. Council members remain skeptical.
We can't be passing budgets and then enabling unfettered overtime. If the dollars aren't right, we should be honest about it on the front end. We should be clear about how much overtime we're going to need so that it's not year over year council signing supplemental budgets to support on the back end overtime spending that was already spent.
Last year's for hours for overtime, we spent 914,000 hours. This year we're projecting to be just under that by 898,000 hours. And it does correlate with our vacancies. If you actually take the hours of our vacancies and put that into overtime, the numbers do correlate. Obviously, you know, we're filling positions. We expect to be 80 plus just on our sworn staffing this year, 60 plus on our professional staffing. So as those bodies are fully trained and out on the streets, you know, we will start to see a reduction in overtime.
We need to rein the excessive overtime in. I understand, again, the situation that we're in, but we need to recruit, we need to right size, we need to civilianize, we need to do all the things that this department is capable of doing.
Tensions ran high at times as well during the budget hearings for the city administrator's office. Faith Leach and her team faced pointed questions from City Councilman Isaac Yitzi Schleifer on the fee increases included in the proposed budget, referring to them as taxes. The city leader pushing back, saying there are no new taxes proposed in the budget.
You know, the residents of Baltimore don't really care what it's called, whether it's a tax or a fee. If you're charging them more money, it's, you know, it's a tax. I mean, Merriam-Webster says a tax is a charge usually of money imposed by legislative or other public authority upon persons or property for public purposes. And so, you know, call it what you want. At the end of the day, people are strapped right now with, you know, they're raising utility costs and they just can't make ends meet. And so any additional costs on them from the government, from us, is just something that many people can't weather.
There are no new taxes in this budget. I want to remind everybody that Maryland courts restrict this government from our ability to raise taxes to only for revenue purposes. When we raise a fee, we can only raise a fee up to the cost to produce the service. So when we talk about raising fees, it is not a tax. And when we say that it is a tax, we're purposefully confusing the residents.
Can we talk about the taxi tax increase?
Sure.
So is that being increased or is that off the table since the chief of staff said we're not raising any taxes?
Yep. So the taxi tab increase, and again, Laura might need your help with this one, but the taxi cab increase that is being levied to the taxi cab companies. So that is on them. That isn't necessarily a tax on the on residents. And I think the conversation earlier was about balancing or increasing taxes for the residents of the city of Baltimore, which we have not increased resident taxes on the residents of the city of Baltimore.
Right. So these fees and tax increases are impacting the residents of Baltimore. If you raise the taxi tax, the people who are going to pay for that are going to be the people who don't have cars and are using taxis to get to work, to get to childcare. The taxi companies are not just going to absorb this increase in tax. They never do.
I caught up with Councilman Schleifer and the City Council President Z. Cohen about the budget hearings. We'll hear their take on the process after this. During the hearing with the Mayor's Office of Children and Family Success, City Council President Z. Cohen pressed representatives from that office on a recent decision to use nearly $4 million from the Baltimore City Youth Fund to pay for youth works. The administration argues the city needed the money to ensure it could employ young people this summer, given the increase in minimum wage. However, the council president questions if that's in line with what the youth fund was intended for.
This idea that city government, particularly the mayor's office, could then come whenever there's a shortfall and utilize the funds, I think felt deeply inappropriate to several members of this council.
This is not the first time that the city of Baltimore has leveraged this Children and Youth Fund. We've been here before. And given that this specific instance would have if we did not have these additional funds, then we would have had less young people that were employed.
During the hearing with the Mayor's Office of Children and Family Success, City Council President Z. Cohen pressed representatives from the Mayor's Office on a recent decision to use nearly $4 million from the Baltimore City Youth Fund to pay for youth works. The administration argues the city needed the money to ensure it could employ young people this summer given the increase in minimum wage. However, the council president questions if that's in line with what the youth fund was intended for.
This idea that city government, particularly the mayor's office, could then come whenever there's a shortfall and utilize the funds, I think felt deeply inappropriate to several members of this council.
This is not the first time that the city of Baltimore has leveraged this Children and Youth Fund. We've been here before. And given that this specific instance would have if we did not have these additional funds, then we would have had less young people that were employed. That was not going to be an option for this administration. We wanted to have 8,500 young people getting paid $15 an hour, and that is what we did.
My question remains, though, is this the best way to fund youth works? And is this the best way to fund any other priority of either the council or the administration? And maybe the answer is yes, but again, having been there when Mayor Young, then City Council President Young, wrote this legislation, I can tell you the priorities of either a mayor or the city council were not the intent of the law.
I spoke with both City Council President and Councilman Schleifer about the concerns they have about the budget this year for fiscal year 2026. Baltimore City Council President Zeke Cohen and Councilman Isaac Yitzi Schleifer both agree on one thing this budget season.
Well, the council president was very clear that they should not be coming in way over budget.
It's just really important that the council continue to send the message that residents and everyone deserves to have a clear understanding of how much we are allocating to each agency, and that when we sign off on the budget, when we negotiate and then come to an agreement, that's it. That is the budget.
Overruns continue to plague the city's bottom line, driven largely by vacancies and overtime spending.
That is not an effective or transparent way to do budgeting, and the residents of this city and our city council deserve much better.
Councilman Schleifer says agencies don't always provide the details to the council about how the dollars are spent, especially when it comes to the number of vacant employee positions. How can the city council effectively budget without that information?
We can't, and so every year it's the same situation. If a position hasn't been filled in 18 months, the odds are it's not getting filled in the next 12. And so therefore, those kinds of positions should not be included in agencies' budgets.
Mayor Brandon Scott's budget proposal includes millions of dollars in fee increases. Despite the mayor's team arguing taxes are not going up, Councilman Schleifer has a different opinion.
Well, their proposal that they presented to us in these hearings had a slide on how they plan to generate close to $30 million in new taxes and fees, and a third of the items on their list were taxes. So both taxes and fees are going up, and what we also learned is that they're exploring raising over 600 fees currently on the city's books. And so not only are we looking at tax increases, we're also looking at across the board fee increases.
While the leader of Baltimore looks to taxpayers to foot the growing bill of running the city, the watchdog responsible for rooting out waste, fraud, and abuse is asking for more help. Do you believe that it's necessary for the city to have additional staff for an office to make sure that the city is operating the way it should be and rooting out fraud, and especially given what we've seen come out of that office for DPW and other agencies?
I do think it is really important to support the Inspector General, that her office be fully staffed up. That is not one of the offices where we're seeing an extraordinary amount of long-term vacant positions. And so what I will say is that we are in active negotiation around those two positions that she requested.
I think those should be a top priority. We see a great, tremendous return on investment for all of those inspectors.
We often hear that budgets are a reflection of a city's priorities. And if the mayor is investing more money in his own office and expanding his staff while telling the city that he's not going to invest in the Office of Inspector General, What does that tell the city about where his priorities are?
Look, it's the mayor's budget. It's his prerogative to fund what he wants to fund, and the council has the ability to cut certain parts of the budget as well as to reallocate that amount to other things. And I think it behooves the council to cut vacancies, one vacancy both in DOT and one vacancy both in DPW, and to reallocate those 2 pins to the Inspector General's office.
The mayor's office tells Fox 45 News the positions the Inspector General is looking to add were not cut. Rather, a proposed enhancement was simply not approved. That's it for this week's edition of Fox 45 News In Depth. I'm Mackenzie Frost. Thanks for watching and have a great day.